My first month on Kara Station, they told me the waiting was the worst part. I thought that was something veterans say to recruits who ask too many questions, a way to make the silence feel earned, to give weight to the long watches between sensor pings. I was 22 years into my training cycle. I had never seen a ship cross the Sullivan Reach line in either direction, and the senior staff spoke of the line the way they spoke of breathing. Not a rule anyone made, just a fact of the body, the kind of thing you don't think about until it stops. The Sullivan Reach is the outermost edge of the Kareth border complex. 7 monitoring stations strung along a corridor of dead space roughly 40 light minutes wide. On one side, the rest of the galaxy. On the other, human space. That is what the charts call it, in letters that have not changed since the charts were first drawn. Not a sector designation, not a territorial claim, just a name, plain and final, the way you'd label a cliff edge on a survey map, because you have run out of words for what happens to things that go over it. I had been assigned to the forward observation bridge, third watch, under Senior Monitor S of F, Orn. Orn was 56 years old and had held her post for 18 of them. She did not speak often, and when she did, it was to name things precisely. She told me on my first day that the line was not ours to enforce, that we did not enforce it, that no one did, and that this was the thing I needed to understand before I understood anything else about my posting. The Verlith Compact had sent a fleet in 11 days before I arrived. 43 warships, full engagement configuration, through the Reach's eastern corridor, across the line. I found this in the transit log when I reported for duty, a dry record, coordinates, and timestamps. No annotation. The column where outcome is recorded was blank. I asked Ornabout on my second shift, and she looked at me for a moment the way you look at someone who has asked you whether the dark is cold. The column is blank, she said, because we don't know what happened to 42 of them. That number stayed with me. Not 43. 42. I pulled the expanded log that night. The 43rd ship, Registry Verlith designation, strike cruiser class, named the Settled Argument, a translation I found later in the Compact's own records, had crossed back through the line on day 7 of the incursion. Alone, transmitting a distress code that our station's system flagged as malformed, not because of damage to the signal, but because the Compact's own distress protocol has a defined header sequence, and the header on this transmission was intact. The malformation was in the message body. It was the correct code, transmitted on the correct frequency, with the correct authentication markers. Repeated, without interval, for 6 hours. The same 40-character sequence, over and over, as though the crew had sat down at the communications console, typed the distress header, and then held a single key down until their hands gave out. Orn had been on shift when the Settled Argument crossed back. She told me this without effect, the way she told me everything. She had watched it on the forward sensor array, a single cruiser mass contact, heading out system at low acceleration, running no evasion pattern, just moving. She said it reminded her of a thing that is very tired. The ship passed through the Reach cordon 3 hours into her watch. Standard intercept protocol required a hail, and she sent one. The Settled Argument did not respond with its communications array. It responded by modifying its distress signal. The 40-character sequence shifted once to a 41-character sequence. The added character was a notation in the Compact's own tactical shorthand, a code she had to look up in the reference archive, because it was so old it predated the current notation standard by roughly 400 years. It meant, "We are coming home. Please do not ask us what we saw." She cleared the intercept and let them through. The Settled Argument made dock at Verlith Station 9 days later, and by then her third watch counterpart on the far side of the Reach, the one closest to Compact space, had filed a report that I was eventually read into. All 217 crew members of the Settled Argument were alive, uninjured, and had refused to submit to debriefing. Not aggressively, not in distress, technically. They would answer logistical questions. They ate. They reported from medical screening. When asked by any examiner what had happened inside human space, they each gave the same answer, and then they did not speak again for the remainder of the debriefing period. The answer was 4 words. I was not clear to know what the 4 words were for another 6 months. When I finally read them in the restricted after-action summary, They seemed too small for what they were doing. 4 ordinary words in a row, the kind of phrase you'd hear in a corridor that meant nothing outside the context of the Settled Argument's crew, saying them all at once, in the same tone, with the same stillness in their faces that Orn described as the only thing she actually found difficult to put in her report. She had been back on shift when it happened. The night the Settled Argument crossed back, near the end of her watch, after she'd cleared the intercept, when the ship was already inside the cordon and decelerating toward the transit corridor. A second contact appeared on the forward sensor array. It was not inside human space. It was at the line. It was behind the Settled Argument, sitting at the boundary at a range of roughly 8 light seconds, which is close enough that a ship of that mass ought to have been visible on passive optical before it appeared on active array. It was not. It appeared on active array at 4:11 station time, and it held position for 11 minutes and 33 seconds, which Orn timed manually because she did not trust the automated log to capture what she was watching. During that time, it did not cross the line. It did not fire. It did not transmit on any frequency the station's array could detect. It did nothing except exist at the boundary and maintain a constant bearing on the Settled Argument's diminishing drive signature. Then at 4:22 and change, it turned around and went back in. I asked her once, this was months into my posting, late in a third watch when the reach was quiet and she was more willing to speak, what it had looked like on the sensor return. What kind of ship it was. She considered this for a moment, and then she said that the return was consistent with a large vessel, possibly cruiser class or above, and that the mass estimate had been imprecise because the object's reflective profile did not match any configuration in the station's recognition database. I asked her if she thought it had been following the Settled Argument. She thought about this longer than I expected. I think, she said finally, that it had already finished following it. The following was done. It came to the line to watch it leave, and when it was satisfied that it had left, it went back. I have thought about that sentence for the rest of my career. The following was done. Not that the pursuit had ended. Not that the ship had made it to safety. That the following, whatever it was, whatever it meant, whatever understanding lives inside the word when something that size uses it, was finished, complete, resolved. The Settled Argument had been released, not escaped. The Verlith Compact formally petitioned the Galactic Survey Authority to redraw the Sullivan Reach cordon inward by 40 light minutes within 2 months of the incident. The Survey Authority complied without convening a formal review board, which is not standard procedure. The column in the transit log where the outcome of the Compact's 43-ship incursion should be recorded is still blank. I have checked it twice a year, every year of my posting. No one has filled it in. I do not expect anyone will. The 42 ships did not return. The Settled Argument did. 217 crew members alive, uninjured, for words, and then silence. I have sometimes wondered, on the long watches between sensor pings, what the calculation was, whether it was mercy or instruction or something else entirely that doesn't have a word in any language I've been trained in. Whether they were sent back to tell us, or simply allowed back because the message had already been delivered in the only way that would make us believe it. Somewhere in a compact medical file that I am not cleared to read, 217 people are listed as psychologically stable, returned to limited duty, cause of ongoing selective mutism, undetermined. The column stays blank. The line stays where the Survey Authority moved it. Carrot Station keeps its watches, and the Sullivan Reach stays quiet. And I have learned, in the years since that night, what Orn meant when she said the waiting was the worst part. She did not mean the boredom. She meant that the waiting means whatever came back from human space has not yet decided to come back again, and that this is not the same thing as safety. We tend the line. We do not know who else is tending it from the other side. We are not sure it is human.